Thank you for joining the episode 2 of the VAI Academy webinar. See lots of familiar faces, but as well as new joiners. I like to see the momentum here. For those not familiar with myself, I'm Bertrand Nézet, Chief Market Intelligence Officer and co-founder of Viridios AI, which is a data and intelligence platform around the carbon markets. We historically started focusing on the voluntary carbon market and recently moved into the compliance space by introducing some data sets around the ACU Australia market. Actually, just a week ago, we just launched project level data for the ACU market, replicating more or less that what we have on the VCM for about 2 years. Today, I'll be joined by Elisa Vollmer, who is a product leader at VAI. Hi, Maria. Do you want to say a few words? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Bertrand. I'm Elisa Vollmer, and I've been with Viridios since 2021, and I've been heading the product development side of things for a little bit now.
Thank you very much. So format-wise, for the webinar, we have prepared a presentation for you, about 35 minutes, and then we'll go into a question and answer session. So throughout the presentation, as soon as you hear something, you have a remark, you have a question, don't hesitate to log it, using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll pick up the question later. We started about around a year ago. We started preparing and issuing a weekly VCM report, and that's where all this efforts at Viridios AI around carbon market education started. He has grown tremendously since, and more people are subscribing to this weekly report where we surface pricing data for carbon credits, but as well as analytics around supply and demand, so issuances and retirement. And more recently, we've also showing retirement beneficiary, meaning which are the corporations which have more retirement activities in the last 30 days. And we do that for various segments. So we cover red plus, afforestation, reforestation, cook stove, blue carbon, and things are going to keep expanding. So if you haven't subscribed to this VCM report, I encourage you to do this. We started this VAI Academy series in February with the intent to sort of show how to best use our platform to solve some problems you may have. In February, we focused a lot on our freshly baked analytics product. So we went through all the dashboard, and it was pretty comprehensive. This week, we are taking another angle, and we are looking at how to use VAI to craft, but also execute, monitor your carbon offsetting strategy, and to make it easier. So in a nutshell, how can you sort of supercharge your sustainability team with the help of our platform? Last word before starting, on the episode 3 of this webinar series, I'm thinking of inviting a client of us who is using the platform, and to sort of go into a bit of a use case on how it's helpful, and sharing this with the community. So I'm in discussion with a few of our clients, but if that's something that sounds interesting to you, don't hesitate to reach out. Without further ado, let me share my screen. Oops, oops, oops. So so this is a bit of the table of content for today. We'll briefly talk about the prerequisite before going into a carbon credit strategy, competitive landscape, carbon credit attributes. Then we'll talk about portfolio construction and why diversification is important, and then talk on strategy execution. So for the prerequisite, obviously a good place to start is measuring your own greenhouse gas emission. However, it's not as simple as it sounds. So first, you have to define your organization boundary. What are we measuring? Some corporation can have a fairly complex organizational/legal structure. So you need to decide what's in, what's out. Then we also need to talk about operationally, what are the boundaries? Typically, the taxonomy in carbon accounting is people talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Not going to spend a whole lot on this, but just a refresher for everyone. Scope 1 is typically emissions coming directly, it's direct emission. So typically, natural gas emission arising from usage of furnaces, boilers, as well as the vehicles fleet of your employees. Scope 2 would be emission, indirect emission, but emission related basically to energy and electricity consumption. And scope 3, and that's where it gets tricky. Scope 3 is everything, every other indirect emission. So that can include things like the emission of your suppliers. In a case of a food and beverage company, it can be your suppliers. It can also be the emission arising from your sold products. So for instance, for an oil and gas company, for Shell, for instance, all the emission arising from the gasoline or diesel that is sold would be counted as scope 3. And then things like the car, the emission arising from, your employees, taking their car to go to the office, that would be also scope 3. So you can imagine that it's quite a large bit. And then for a lot of companies, scope 3 is obviously like the biggest part, but not always. And so this is an interesting thing on this slide where I'm showing sort of side by side Apple's scope 1, 2, and 3. And so here we can see that obviously scope 3 is by far the largest. Just product manufacturing account for 76% of the full carbon footprint, whereas I've put next to it Air France-KLM, which is a large airline in Europe. And here it's exactly reverse. So we've got scope 1, 83%, and then scope 2 and 3 just account for the balance, 17%. And that's obviously fuel consumption in all the aircraft fleet is obviously what's behind a large part of this 83% of direct emission. Very briefly again on this, just to show, the wide spectrum also of this carbon footprint. So I like this graph because it shows profit per ton of greenhouse gas scope 1 to 3. So we see on the top left, we see companies which are generating a lot of profit for 1 ton of emissions. So between $100 to $2,000 per ton. So typically there we see a lot of financial industry. We see Bank of China, JP Morgan, Nordea Bank. And then once we come down this chart, we see the technology companies. So that's where we see Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, which, they don't have in general huge emissions, because for technology company, a lot comes from your data center, and if you can get it to rely on renewable energy, that's already improved seriously. But some of these companies are also shipping product in the case of Apple, and we've seen that Apple had quite a significant footprint. And then coming down, then unsurprisingly, at the bottom right, we see all the oil and gas companies. So you'll have Equinor, BP, Shell, E.ON, which obviously have a much smaller profit per ton of CO2 equivalent. Typically, after you've done your footprinting, the next step is to set reduction targets. It's not mandatory, but in general, corporations do this to demonstrate their commitment towards fight towards climate change. Your reduction targets, a lot to be taken into account there. What horizon are you doing? Just near-term or long-term targets. Ideally, you do both. And then based on what scope? So just scope 1 and 2, which was the case historically. And then increasingly people are including targets as well for your scope 3. And then comes the question on what type of target. So are we talking about an absolute target, like I'm going to reduce my greenhouse gas emission by 35% by 2030? Or is it more intensity-based kind of targets? Like I'm planning to reduce by 100 kilogram the emissions related to, I don't know, $1,000 of profit, for instance. So that would be an intensity-based kind of target. Once we've set the target, it's typically what people follow is and do is carbon management, apply the carbon management hierarchy. That basically the guiding principle is that we should always start by trying to avoid, reduce, and substitute. Then potentially sequester some of the emission at source with the use of CCS technologies. And finally comes offset, just at the bottom, when it comes to really offsetting residual emissions. There's quite a few guidelines and frameworks that can help you to navigate and know what, like sort of the state of the art management of offset program. The Oxford Net Zero Guiding Principles, this is very well respected, and it's been around for a while. VCMI has, I think last year, quite interesting, especially after they published their so-called Scope 3 flexibility claim. I think 2 months ago, or in April, actually, less than that, AITA also published new guidelines around carbon offsetting. And just today, actually, the US government, so the Biden-Harris government has published a set of guidelines for both supply, so I'd say quality, integrity of credit, but as well as demand on, expectation around claims of corporation. Last but not least, very important to get support from the C-suite within your corporation before starting a carbon credit strategy. You need to secure a budget, and you need to liaise with your potentially procurement department to, so that you incorporate their requirements from a procurement standpoint. With that, I'm gonna hand over to you, Maria Elisa.
Thank you, Bertrand, for the crash course on benchmarking. Let me take over now. All right, so Bertrand just explained what once you've defined what framework you may want to follow, then it's good to put it in perspective and look what peers are doing. And so that's what we're gonna do here now. So from a macro perspective, we are seeing that more and more companies are joining the VCM. From right now, 2024 is on track to supersede 2023. With the CCPs coming online, we expect that number to increase as it gives more confidence to companies to join this market. But even then, 2020, 2021 were deemed a really good years for the carbon market, and we're still seeing increases after that time, which is encouraging. Overall, the market is daunting. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of discrepancies, unknowns, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help companies navigate the complexity, standardize data, and even if you don't have a dedicated sustainability team, empower you and give you the tools to make those decisions. And so we can start with looking at peers and what they're doing. So we selected Etsy. They are, just to show, they are a e-commerce platform. And here you can see a snapshot on how they are tackling this challenge. Of course, they've already done everything that Bertrand already discussed at this point. Etsy, they've got it under control, and this is just a snapshot of their offsetting strategy. So just a few interesting things that we can notice here is that from 2022 to 2023, you can see a change in their offsetting strategy. They started very heavily in 2022 with renewable energy, and they've since increased their share, reduce their share in renewable energy, and increase the share in gases abatement. Typically, gases abatement includes agricultural gases, includes organic methane, landfill gas, even industrial gases. And they are perceived as being more or having more integrity than renewable energy, just because it's easier to justify the additionality and so forth. So it's interesting to see that shift there. Another interesting thing to note is that they've, over time, even though they've potentially increased the integrity behind their portfolio, the average price has declined over time. So in 2024, so far, they're averaging $6.6 a ton, and in 2023, that was $10.82 a ton. If we also look at the average vintage, we can see that it's fairly recent, 2021. That's where most of the liquidity is right now, and so it's encouraging to see that they are prioritizing earlier vintages. And when you look at the retirement time series, you can see that they retire throughout the year. And then lastly, if we look at the ratings, most of their projects have been rated by B0 and are BBB. And if they're not BBB, they're B or C. But this is encouraging to see that they are prioritizing projects that have been rated. Then if we compare it to REI, it's an American outdoor gear recreation retailer. They've kept their portfolio, pretty much exactly the same year over year, and they don't seem to be prioritizing rated projects as much. And then similar to or different to Etsy, they only seem to have one retirement event a year, so they procure everything once a year for the most part, and they have a lower average vintage. You can see then on the price that they're paying right now, their average price is higher for 2024 than it was for 2023, which says a lot given the market conditions. And then in the interest of time, I'll go quickly through these other two ones. This is EasyJet. It's a budget airline, European budget airline. You can see from 2022 to 23, they've dramatically changed their strategy. They used to prioritize renewable energy, and they've completely switched over to household devices and gases abatement, and none of the credits that they've retired have been rated. And then similar to REI, they have multiple retirement events. Similar to Etsy, they have multiple retirements per year. And then lastly, we have Eni. They're an energy company also out of Europe. We can see here that 2022 and 2023 were 100% red, but only high-rated projects, which says a lot about what their strategy is there. And in terms of the average price paid, it's decreased, but that is most likely due to market conditions as well. But we can take, double click on this and switch over to the platform to see how you would see it right now on our platform to date. So I'll stop sharing and come back with what do we have on the platform live right now. Okay, so this is our analytics module if you're not familiar with it. And we're on the analytics module, retirement beneficiaries dashboard. I've already filtered by Eni, and you can see here that they've joined the market in 2021, and 2024 has so far been their biggest year. And including 2024, which we didn't really have on the last slide, projects are mostly rated, and they tend to be on the higher side of the ratings. And then on the previous slide, we saw only red. And here we see in addition, we see household devices and renewable energy, which seems to indicate that their 2024 strategy is slightly different than what they had been doing the previous 2 years. And you can even see here which projects they've been retiring from, the country, the vintage, and what we see the price per ton was at the time of retirement. So you can see overall how it changes over time, specific retirements over time. So if you're interested in looking at specific companies, competitors, you can come in here and see what they are doing. More broadly, if you're in a specific industry and you want to see what your industry is doing, who the leaders in your industry are, you can come in here and you can search by sector. So if we go into the financial industry, you can see here, the trends over time, who's retiring, Nedbank being the leader over time. Similarly, the breakdown projects, and if you just want to see who's been active in the last year or the last 12 months, then you can see who those are here. So again, I think this is helpful to see, get a sense of who the leaders are in your industry, what your competitors are doing, to see in reality how these concept is applied. And with that, we can move over to our next section. Let me go back to, okay. So at this point, you know what framework you're going to be using, you know what guidelines you're going to be following, and you have a sense of what your competitors are doing. Now it's time for you to figure out, okay, on my port offsetting strategy, which types of projects do I want to tackle? What criteria am I looking for? So there's a few attributes that you might want to consider. Again, this is a complex market and there's a lot more to projects than this, but these are some key aspects that you should keep in mind. So first is, how is the project contributing to climate change mitigation? This is just a way to say, okay, is the project reducing emissions or is it removing carbon from the atmosphere? They have different implications because of the durability or how the reversal of them. So that's one. And we see very different prices and attributes to them. And then if we drill down a little bit more is, okay, if the project is sequestering or removing carbon from the atmosphere, how is it doing it? Is it doing it via improved agricultural practices, or is it biochar? Are they planting trees? And these attributes tell you about, this is the beef of what the project is doing, right? How are they really contributing to climate change? And then we move into, okay, what methodology is the project using? as we know, these methodologies are improved over time. Technology improves, our understanding of climate change and mitigation is improving over time. And so, of course, methodologies are improving with our shared knowledge. And there's a preference for more recent projects, more recent methodologies, because there's an understanding that they would be higher integrity than older ones. Then we have the location of the project. If you have a company that has operations in multiple countries, or that has a supply chain that spans multiple countries or regions, then you may want to prioritize projects that are located in some of those countries. And then lastly is we look into the impact of that project. So if it's an afforestation, reforestation project, okay, what types of trees are they planting? Or is it a monoculture that it's going to be harvested for wood products? Or are we talking about the restoration of an ecosystem that prioritizes native species and that emulates a local ecosystem? As you can see, these will have very different, in essence, yes, they're removing carbon, and that number may be the same, but the implications on how the project is implemented and run has far-reaching implications for the community and the local ecosystem. And of course, all of these factors affect price. So what we see is that companies will take a mix of these attributes to make sure that their portfolio is diversified. But ultimately, what companies care about is that a carbon credit amounts to a ton of carbon reduced or removed from the atmosphere. And this is the biggest challenge, right? This is why we've seen so much controversy in this space. This is why we've seen so much hesitancy to join the market, because there's not a clear-cut way to make sure that the credit that you're buying is really doing what it is meant to be doing. And so that's why we've seen the core carbon principles come up. And so what the core carbon principles will do is at the methodology level, they'll come up with actionable guidelines and rules to define which projects are aligned with this and which ones aren't. And like I mentioned earlier, this should give buyers the confidence they need to say, okay, look at my portfolio, this is all aligned with the CCPs. And then more at the project level, you also have the project ratings. We also showed before how some companies are prioritizing rated projects to give that additional layer of confidence. And these are all, at the end of the day, this is what we want, right? We want companies to align with high integrity. We want companies to commit to their climate action, and the carbon market has the potential to not only encourage internal decarbonization, but also encourage and finance some of these actions outside of their value chain. And so now I'll turn it over to Bertrand, who will take all of these attributes that I just mentioned and show you how you can use our platform, the VAI platform, to filter out the projects that align with what you're looking for to fit into your portfolio.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Here we go. We've got there's two places where you can actually access carbon projects on the platform. You have it under prices and projects, but essentially both work pretty much the same way. You on the left-hand side. So okay, let's start on the top. In the event, you know the ticker, and we create ticker by putting a 3-letter or 2-letter acronym representing the standard, followed by the project ID. So for instance, if we take famous Rimbaraya, you would access it by VCS 672. So that's one way of using this. But the power of this module really comes when with the filters which are defined on the left. So here you can filter obviously by standard. So as for argument's sake, let's say that we want to look at REDD+ project in South America. So REDD+ is typically, at least among this registry, is hosted on with Vera. Then we have to select the type. Here you have 5 categories. These are the top category, and you can go a little more specific. You may be a bit confused by our taxonomy at first. We are because we created this taxonomy because, as you know, methodology depend on the standards, and they are generally not shared across standard. So for REDD+ on our side, it would be ecosystem conservation, so which you can see here. But if once you're on the platform, easy things that you can do is you can go to our how do we call that? Our documentation center, where you'll find all the details you need. So for instance, if we look at the project type taxonomy, so you'll see the categories. So we have AFOLUs, we've seen that. And then right underneath you have ecosystem conservation. That's where REDD+ is, but actually that's also where you'll find IFM projects, which you know are really also about conserving the ecosystems. But then we are able to go one level deeper, and we have the activity. So typically REDD+ would be AFOLU 0101 and AFOLU 0102, which cater for planned and unplanned deforestation, you know. And then your IFM, your improved forest management, would also be captured as an activity. Coming back to our menu, so we can filter by types. Then geography-wise, you can type a country if you want to. Otherwise, you've got this big menu where you can say, I'm interested in all of South America. And let us say that we want, and that's typically something corporations which like REDD+ often have a keen interest on biodiversity, on life on land. So we can say that we want SDG 15, life on land. And then finally, to have like an overlay of quality and integrity, we can request, we want projects with all the way AAA to let's say BBB. So let's select all this, and then when we come to the top, we've got our list of projects. Sorry. If you click on the chevron here, you will actually see all the, even directly without accessing the project page itself, you'll see the prices. We can do a few things on top of whatever I've mentioned so far. We can also filter by vintage. So let's say I'm only interested in fairly recent vintage. I can say I'm only interested in vintage 20 to 22. And then finally, you've got also here a graph showing you the price distribution of the project selected. So you can also use that tool to sort of restrict and say that you want only projects lower than, let's say, $10. And that would be, and so that would refresh your, you click apply, and it's going to be refreshing your list. What else to, here a few things. You see the prices, you see a little colored dot next to it, which would be depth level 1, for green dot depth level 2. So that would be a bigger topic, but let's put it this way, that you can look at it as like a proxy, this color dot for liquidity, and that's us giving our user indication on how this price point was manufactured. So if it's a green dot, it's a quote received in the last 10 days, either a trade or a bid and offer. I think I've seen a question around that in the chat. And then if it's blue, then there'll be a little more interpolation, extrapolation involved. And then depth tree is even more modeling. So yeah. So that's how you can, I could show you on and on many other scenario, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on. once you click on a certain project, you access a project page like this, and it's a feature that we launched a couple of months ago, which is great for due diligence and you know, when you are constructing and choosing your project, constructing your portfolio and choosing your project, is the compare project features. So you can compare one pivot project to many others. So let's say, for instance, I sort of know the tickers by heart, but you could be searching using, you know, standard type geography. You have other ways to retrieve your project. So let's say BCS. And then we've got 3 projects, and then in a neat column fashion, you can compare, you know, the type of the project, the activity. We've seen that earlier. So 2 projects in Peru, 1 in Brazil. You can look at the estimated average. You can also compare the price. You can also chart the price, overlay them together. You can, for the co-benefits, you can look at the different different SDGs. So it's this way you can. It's very neat to see the differences in terms of co-benefits being delivered, and then we can also go more at the vintage level. So we can compare again price history. And we can look at the number of credits which have been issued, verified, retired across projects, looking at the eligibility, so NGO eligibility, but as well as your Article 6.2, 6.4. We made a post, I think a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, and that's exactly where under this eligibility, that's where we're going to surface the core carbon principles from the ICBCM, from the so the CCP label will be shown there, and we also show CCB, Climate Community Biodiversity. Finally, on the platform, one thing that I wanted to show is when you, and we'll see an example of that in one of the portfolio, but sometimes there's a project that you've selected for your portfolio, but for some reason it's too expensive, doesn't meet your budget, or simply you don't find any outstanding credits. They've all been retired. So we've got, once you go on the project page, we have a section like this. So it's normally just like this, but you can expand it, and it shows the 10 most similar projects based on a similarity score. So when you click here, you'll see the score. It's from 0 to 100%, and this does not look at the prices. This is purely a similarity score based on all the reference data, all the attributes of the project, but it doesn't take into account the price. So for instance, we can see that this project goes at 978, and it's interesting to compare prices. Like for instance, the Madre de Dios Amazon project, which have attracted some controversy a couple of months ago, we can see that it's being priced at a much lower price point. Then now moving on, going back to the slides, what I wanted to show you is how to pull all this information and what you can do with it. So this is not yet part of our product. Also, it's coming soon, but we've had numerous discussions with existing clients, and they've built. So they are basically piping our data through API into their internal platform that they use to basically craft their carbon credit portfolio. And you know, I've seen a few of these tools talking to customer, and they all revolve around the same thing. So imagine that here you start with your quantities that you want to offset. So let us say 600,000 tons. That could be, I don't know, 50% of your scope 3 emissions, like residual emissions that you can't abate. And then you choose your different tickers, so the project ID and the vintage for the carbon projects that are of interest to you. And then you define weights. And then all the rest can be, so this will be in yellow would be typically your inputs, and then all the rest of the data can be piped from API, from our platform to your internal system. And so from the weight, we know what is the quantity you need to purchase for each of these credits. What is the latest price available? What would be the dollar value that you have to invest in every of these assets or every of these credits? Here you can pull what is the outstanding amount. So, number of tons of credits issued minus retired. So this way it's a easy way to check whether there's still stock available, and then whether a project is considered as avoidance credits or removal, so that our data surface it, whether it's NBS, nature-based solution, or technology, the proponent, and then this way you can plot a few graphs to look at your diversification, for instance. So you can look at your country diversification, your market diversification, so blue carbon, ARR, cook stove, what are the respective weight of that, and then avoidance and removal, as well as nature-based and technology. So needless to say, I think everyone is fairly familiar with the concept of the benefits of diversification and taking a portfolio approach rather than just concentrating your retirement into one project. That's a way to spread your risk, your country risk, your risk towards a certain proponent, your risk towards potentially a carbon crediting program or methodology that could be attacked. So by not focusing, not putting all your eggs in the same basket, that's very much recommended. And then typically people will calculate metrics for their portfolio. So it's going to be what is the total budget, what is the average price per credit, the average vintage, and so on. And just very briefly, because we are almost at time, I've created a slightly a second portfolio, very different from the rest, and we see here much less diversification benefits, but we also see, if you remember, average price of this portfolio is $11.60, whereas here it's $150. Much lower budget, average vintage much lower. Then here I've highlighted in red that you see on top of that there's an issue because there's no outstanding credits available for that project. So typically the user would go to our platforms, look at user similarity feature to look for a replacement for that project. Yeah, that's basically what I had. Sorry, it took a little longer than expected. Over to you, Maria, just to wrap up.
All right. Then before we open it up to questions, then I wanted to cover a couple of things. So now, as a recap, the guidelines, what competitors are doing or others in your industry are doing, and you've built your portfolio. Then you know which projects you would want in your portfolio. Then the question is, how do you access that? How do you execute on your strategy? And so there are two ways that you can do that using the AI. One of them is a request for quotes. So you could go, once you've selected the projects, you could go into the project page and click the request for quote functionality up top. And it would open this window for you where you can select, using as reference the price that a VAI is giving you, select what vintage and what volume you would be looking for. And this quote will get sent directly to project developers that are our partners, and then for that specific project, or to intermediaries. And so you would get back a response from either developer and or brokers saying what their offer price would be. And so from there, what would happen is we would take this conversation outside of our ecosystem. You would negotiate that on your own terms. This is something that we offer for free to our users. Our intention is to facilitate the market. And so we just want to help you make those connections to the supply side. Then the other approach you might consider is, and this is going to be released next week, the same way that we've mapped who the retirees are, we've also mapped who the transaction partners are for some of those retirements. So typically you'll see climate impact partners, ACT commodities. And so this would give you a clue on who already has access to some of these credits. So if you're interested, for example, in blue carbon, and you want to see which transaction partner has facilitated transactions for a specific blue carbon project, you could go into the platform and then see who may have that in their portfolio. And then lastly, once you have your portfolio set up, then you want to keep track of it. You want to keep track of how the projects are doing, any price fluctuations. You're also thinking about the next year cycle. And so you can use the VAI platform to stay on top of changes in ratings, projects that may now be rated that weren't before, and news associated with the projects that you're looking at. Say that there's a controversy with a certain project developer, then you might want to not include them in your next iteration of your annual portfolio. And that is the last I had. I think we're ready to open it up for questions, Bertrand. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Maria Elisa. And over to you, Katie. Do we have questions? Oh, you're on mute, Katie.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, we do have a couple. So the first question is, are the prices displayed actual settled prices or estimated value based on Viridios estimates?
Okay, so if by estimates, the question is, do we sort of make a judgment, or is there some appreciation or some our opinion on certain projects coming into play? And the categorical answer is no. So we work with data that we collect across the ecosystem, so from brokers, project developers, corporations. So from upstream to downstream, and so we get traded prices, and we also get quotes, so which are typically your bids and offers, and that gets piped into a robust pricing methodology, which is using standard quant finance techniques, which I've been working with all my life. And so there's and we've even have white paper really explaining how this methodology works. So it's not it's a good place to reiterate that it's very auditable, the way we produce our prices. We've got outlier checks with the data, and everything what the methodology is doing is clearly depicted and described into white paper. So there's no AI in a way, and black box doesn't come into picture at all when it comes to us producing pricings.
Yeah, and if I may add, so I think this question might have been asked in the context of our estimate of how much a company might have paid. So this is the price that we have for that given project, that given vintage on the day of retirement. So every quote that we receive, they're anonymized, so we don't really know who's on the other side of that transaction. But this is an aggregation of what our methodology output for that project, that vintage on the day of retirement.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, from that, yeah,
Just in case.
that's a good link, yeah, to what we, to the price we displayed. Yeah, so it's a good point. That's a price at exactly the date of the retirement. Do we have any more questions, Katie?
Yes, and you kind of alluded to this in your previous answer, but would you be able to access any research papers, market outlook, forecasts published by Viridios?
In fact, we do, and maybe the simplest way for me is to demonstrate it. So typically the VCM reports that we publish every week is available through our news module. And so when we go here, that's a question that I'm getting a lot. So and at the end we have something called VAI report. So, you know, every week the report we produce is archived here, and then we also have the monthly ACU or Australia report that we produce. Any more questions?
Yes. So the next question is, how do you extract and clean retirement beneficiaries?
Do you want to take this one, Maria Elisa? Happy to provide more context on the AI side of things, but I think you've been much closer to the topic.
Sure. Yeah. So this data is very unstructured across registries, right? We will see, you know, a single company spelled 5 different ways. And so what our model does is it predicts, given the context that we have, it predicts who the company may be. And that fits into our standardized database of companies. I think right now we have about 3,000 companies that we're keeping track of. And so there's a model portion, and if there's any uncertainty, then we also have a team of experts on a weekly basis is reviewing that assignment.
Yeah. So yeah, spot on. It's been a lot of work on our side to create because we know that, you know, some firms are actually processing this data manually, and we wanted to do something more sophisticated, not just to be fancy, but to be scalable. If tomorrow we start onboarding more registries, we've got a good structure that can scale. Yeah, disintegration is a huge challenge, like Maria Elisa has explained, because retirement beneficiary are typically a free text in this registry. So, you know, anyone can capture whatever he wants. So.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I'm working as a consultant in Brazil. Can we see which Brazilian companies are retired credits from the VCM?
Yeah, through, I don't know if, yeah, let me share my screen. I think that's a good way to do that is to go to the retirement beneficiary dashboard, and then we can look by the beneficiary country. So here I would typically look at Brazil, and then that's going to be showing us all the Brazilian companies. So here I have a filter on the last 365 days, but that could be changed. And so we can see that Natura Cosméticos is the biggest retiree. So where we show the quantity, the equivalent market value. So same as what Maria Elisa explained. So we take the price at the time of the retirement multiplied by the quantity, and that's how we get this market value indicative. And then we see obviously the sectors, and then once you click on any of them, so let us say, for instance, you know, let's click on Natura, and then after so it gets added here, and then we can do a deep dive. We can see their portfolio. So it seems to be a mix between renewable and red. Not super surprising. Also, I could have expected slightly more red for a Brazilian company. And then at the bottom here, we've got the individual retirements. So what were exactly the project and what was the vintage? And what is the price per ton? So also price per ton, price does not exactly equate quality. I guess this price button, it's been a feature that has been requested a lot, and because it gives you sort of a good sense of, you know, how committed is a corporation into its, you know, offsetting strategy.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
One more. Yep.
Yep. Perfect. Let's see. Do you have a Puro as well, or any other removal registries? How many registries do you support?
Do you want to take this one, Maria-Lisa?
Yeah, so we support the largest 5 registries. Puro is something that we want to onboard soon, and we've gotten a lot of requests for that. So that's coming. It'll come.
Great. And then there's just a couple of additions to this question. Any quality stamps that I can also select, like social carbon, CCBs, etc.?
Yeah, so CCB, yes, you can select by version, distinction, etc. Social carbon we don't have yet. And then CCPs, like Bertrand mentioned, we're actually working on it right now. So you should have it on the screen in the next month or so.
Yeah, working actively on this. Yeah, I think the CCP is gonna be key as a quality integrity overlay for our customers. We get this question a lot, and I think that's really gonna bring our platform to the next level. I think we are close to time, out of time. I still see a few. Oh, it's funny. The questions are coming toward the end. We'll at least for the non-anonymous questions, we will definitely look at them and make sure we get back to you. We will also create a bit of write a summary of what we discussed with the screenshot and all the documents we went through. The recording are also going to be available for people who couldn't attend on the same page on our website. And yeah, if you want to continue this conversation with Maria-Lisa and myself, you know, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or through email, and we'll be more than happy to engage with you. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Any last word, Maria-Lisa, Katie?
No, thank you all for joining.
Thank you.